cats. They're adorable, they're intelligent, they're one of nature's most efficient killers, and the combination of those features means they have an ego and attitude much bigger than their cute little bodies can possibly contain. Yet despite all that, we love them all the same, and these traits that make cats what they are have been well represented in the Pokémon franchise. Several evolutionary lines based on cats of all shapes and sizes have been introduced almost every generation, and most of them were made available in Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. So the question I dared to ask was, can I complete a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Violet with a team of only cats? As a reminder, there are usually 3 main rules for a Nuzlocke run. First, any Pokémon that faints in battle is considered no longer usable and must be released or boxed. Second, you're limited in the number of Pokémon you can use, usually the first encounter per area of the game, or a preset selection like I'm doing today. And third, you must nickname your Pokémon to give them a bit of personality, which makes it harder to watch them fall. And to make this a hardcore Nuzlocke run, I won't be able to use healing items in battle, I can't switch out after knocking out an opponent's Pokémon, and I cannot level up my team members past the level of a boss trainer's ace. So with that out of the way, let's start the run. I've never been partial to any of the grass-type starters, but for the first time since I've been a fan of the franchise, Paldea's grass starter Sprigatito instantly became my favorite of the 3, just by virtue of being a cat. So Punchy joins the team to start off our run as the unofficial leader of our eventual Clouder of Cats. So once we've gotten through the 2 hours of tutorials and story arc introductions, we can finally get our first few encounters to round out the team. In South Area Province 3, I find a Shinxai named Raymond, who ends up having the extremely useful Intimidate ability, which we'll be making use of to an absurd degree. Then in East Area Province 1, I find a Litleo named Tangy. She gets a boost to her special attack thanks to her quiet nature, but she ends up having the Rivalry ability. This gives her a 25% swing in damage depending on whether the opponent's Pokémon is male or female, making her a bit inconsistent, so I'll have to be careful who I pit her up against. After that, I go ahead and find the fixed encounter Meowth with the Flying Terra type in West Area Province 2 and name her Lolly. She unfortunately won't be seeing much use in the late game, but having a unique Terra type early in the game is pretty cool. Now that we have enough for a functional team, it's time for our first gym battle against Katie and her bug types. I have Tangy start the battle with a workup to boost her special attack, and after surviving a critical hit super effective double kick, a boosted Ember is able to easily one-shot both her Nimble and her Tarantula. She just barely misses out on knocking out her bug Terra Teddiursa, but it just ends up missing a Fury Swipe, so another Ember easily takes it out and gets us an easy first gym victory. So at this point, I have to answer a question that hasn't been addressed yet. What do I do with Eevee? All of the evolutions have some kind of mix of dog, cat, and fox-like traits, so it doesn't feel right or fair to use all of them. So for this run, I've decided to limit myself to just 4 evolutions that I personally consider the most cat-like, and I'll be staggering out acquiring them over the next few major battles. The most obviously cat-like evolution is generally agreed to be Espeon, since its ears are similar to wild cats like lynxes and caracals, and its forked tail is a direct reference to Nekomata, cat-like yokai from Japanese myth. So for those reasons, my first Eevee encounter, Kid Cat, gets to evolve into Espeon later on. And before you ask, his modest nature has absolutely no bearing on this decision. It was just a happy coincidence. So Punchy evolves into Floragato, and he gets to be the one who effortlessly takes down the Titan Cloth without a fuss. And after wrangling up some 5 frames per second Sunflora, we can take on the second gym leader Brassius. Lolly starts us off by taking out both his Petalil and Smoliv with a couple aerial aces each. Then she charms his Grass Terra Sudowoodo before it gets off a Trailblaze, which raises its speed. I then bring in Punchy, who takes a critical hit Trailblaze, then a Rock Throw brings him below half, activating his Oranberry. His aerial ace doesn't do much, but a second one manages to crit, bringing it below half. Punchy gets off one more aerial ace before I have to switch over to Raymond, who finishes it off with a super effective Ice Fang, winning us our second badge. Afterwards, Kid Cat is happy enough to evolve into Espeon, but he won't be much use against the next Titan, Bombardier. Raymond will be the one to take it on, starting with lowering its attack with Intimidate. This allows him to tank its attacks, and we manage to keep his HP above half before beating the first phase. Thanks to that, he could take on the second phase without any issues. I have him Terrestrialize to give his Spark some extra power, and with Arven's Knackley providing useful support, we can easily take it down without an issue. And before we move on, I go ahead and catch my second Eevee, and now I have to choose the next evolution. I decide on Umbreon, as it gives off a black cat, glowy eyes in the darkness kind of vibe. So Bob joins the team and quickly evolves thanks to feeding him a bunch of happiness-inducing berries, and he'll be an extremely important defensive component of the team for the entire run. Next up is our first Team Star boss fight against Giacomo and his dark types. A couple embers from Tangy takes care of his Poniard, and then we're already facing off against his Starmobile. After surviving a Wicked Torque, I have Tangy lower its attacking stats with a Noble Roar before switching over to Bob. He takes next to nothing switching in, and we just need to go back and forth between Snarl and Baby Doll Eyes to continue reducing its attack power, all while dodging metal sounds and taking almost no damage from its Swifts. After that I switch over to Kid, who terastallizes into the normal type in order to remove his dark type weakness. It does try to use metal sound to lower his special defense, but a held clear amulet completely negates it, allowing Kid to safely spam Draining Kisses until it finally goes down, giving us our first Team Star win. We change course and head to Levincia City, and before we take on the next gym, we have to face off against our rival Nemona. I don't have a full team for the fight due to the threat of overleveling, but luckily her team at this point isn't a huge threat. Her Rockruff and Palmy are easily handled by a couple Psybeams from Kid, and Punchy can easily take out her Quaxley with a single Terra Grass Seed Bomb. Iono, on the other hand, is always a bit of a pain to deal with. I start with Raymond against her Wattrel, who takes it out with a nice Fang after a weak Spark. Iona sends out her own Luxio with Intimidate, so I switch to Punchy, who takes a bit of damage from Bite, and a couple Seed Bombs does the trick while healing a bit with a Shell Bell. Bellybolt is next, and there's not much Punchy can do against this chonky boy, so we U-turn back to Raymond, who Intimidates, lowering the power of its Electromorphosis-powered Spark. I go for a couple different Fang attacks, hoping for a flinch, burn, or freeze, but I get none of those, and after Bellybolt brings Raymond down to the last fifth of his HP, I have to switch out. I bring in Tangy to hopefully get off some decent damage with a Bulldoze, and it doesn't do much either. After barely surviving a couple super effective water guns, I switch over to Kid, who can finally take Bellybolt down with a Draining Kiss. Last is Iona's Mismagius, who terastallizes into an Electric type, meaning she now has no weaknesses. I switch over to Bob, who I terastallize into a normal type on the next turn so he won't take any more damage from Hex. All it can do now is use Charge Beam and Confuse Ray, and with the special attack drops from Snarl completely negating any boost it might get from Charge Beam, combined with Leftovers Recovery, Bob's HP never goes down below half. At this point, all we need to do is continue spamming Snarl until Mismagius finally goes down, winning us our third gym badge. Next we go to South Area Province 3, where we find our next encounter as Zangoose. At first glance, you wouldn't really think of Zangoose counting as a cat. It's obviously based on a mongoose, but its Pokédex entry classifies it as a cat-faired Pokémon, so Rudy gets to join the team on a technicality. I also go ahead and grab our next Eevee encounter, who I decide will end up being a Vaporeon. Why Vaporeon? Because it's a catfish. Yeah, my reasoning is based on a pun. Who's gonna stop me? So with a Water Stone I found someplace I can't remember, we immediately evolve Tom into Vaporeon, giving the team some much needed water type coverage. Which is perfect timing too, as the next fight is against Mela and her fire types. I start with Kid against Torkoal, going for a couple Baby Doll Eyes so it can survive its sun-boosted Flame Wheels. I then switch over to Bob, who stalls out the remaining turns of Sun, then we swap to Tom, who can easily take it out with a single super effective Surf. Her Starmobile is next, and it tries to go for a Screech, but like the previous fight against Giacomo, I make sure that Tom is holding a clear amulet to prevent any stat drops. Because of that, there's not much it can really do to him, as Tom's Surfs easily outdamage anything it tries to throw back, leading us to an easy Team Star victory. Tom has another moment to shine right away, as the Titan Orthworm ends up being no match for him, even after being left alone when Arven's Toadschool goes down in a single hit. Afterwards, Raymond conveniently evolves into Luxray, just in time for the gym battle against Kofu and his water types. Rudy opens the battle with a couple Night Slashes that takes out his Veluza. Then I bring in Bob to take on Wug Trio. At first, Bob can't do much due to getting flinched twice and then missing a Snarl, so I switch gears and use Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack. After alternating between Snarl, Moonlight, and Protect, Bob is able to methodically take down Wug Trio and put himself in a good place to take on Kofu's ace, Crabominable. Another Baby Doll Eyes helps reduce the power of a super effective Rock Smash, and then switching over to Raymond to Intimidate helps nerf its Crab Hammer. I have Raymond terastallize, and though it isn't enough for a Spark to get a one-hit KO, he thankfully survives another Crab Hammer, and a second Spark takes it down, getting us another gym victory. Atticus and his poison types are up next, and I have a daring strategy with Rudy in mind. Knowing ahead of time that his Skuntank likes to go for Sucker Punch to start the fight, I have Rudy take advantage and go for a belly drum to maximize his attack. With his attack maxed out, he easily knocks out Skuntank and Muck, while getting a bit of health back with the held Shell Bell. But Atticus's Reverum outspeeds and deals a good chunk of damage with an Iron Head, and even with a max attack stat, a low sweep just barely doesn't KO. But the speed drop does allow Rudy to outspeed the next turn, and it's thanks to this that we reach Atticus's Starmobile without putting the rest of the team at risk of being worn down by poison. I swap in Raymond to get off an Intimidate, then Volt switch over to Bob to continue lowering its attack with Baby Doll Eyes. With its attack sufficiently lowered, I bring in Kid hoping to finish it off with a few Psybeams, but he's just not fast enough to outspeed, so I have to bring in Tom who can finish the job with the Surf. The fight against Atticus is one of those fights that can easily snowball fast, so getting the win relatively painlessly is a relief. Next up is Larry and his normal types, and the new level cap means we can finally evolve Tangy and Punchy into Pyroar and Meowscarada respectively. Tangy will be sitting this fight out, but Punchy finally has the chance to show off his signature move. Flower Trick nearly gets a one-hit KO on Kamala, who then goes for a yawn, but I can just U-turn over to Bob while taking it out, as the Dunsparce comes in next. As usual, I have Bob use Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack, while the Dunsparce goes for a Glare to paralyze, and it ends up paralyzing itself thanks to Bob's Synchronize ability. I then switch to Rudy, taking the chance for a full paralysis, but the Dunsparce ends up fighting through it to get off a decently strong Hyper Drill, so now it's too risky to pull off another Belly Drum strat. Low Sweep can't get it below half, as it lets loose another Glare that paralyzes, but Rudy manages to fight through paralysis twice in a row, and takes it down with a couple slashes. Last is Staraptor, and I bring in Raymond to Intimidate as he terrestrializes into a pure normal type. Raymond survives a couple strong facades before Volt switching over to Bob for our tried and true strategy of lowering its attack with Baby Doll Eyes, then switching over to Kid to finish it off with a couple Psybeams once it's safe, securing our 5th gym badge. We go straight to the next fight against Nemona without being able to change our team, which is why I had Punchy go first against Larry. He can easily take out Nemona's Lycanroc with a Flower Trick right off the bat after taking a bit of damage from an Accelerock, then U-turn over to Kid who takes out her Gumi with a Draining Kiss. I keep Kid in to set up a Reflect, then he thankfully fights through paralysis caused by a Thunder Wave to take out her Palma with a Psybeam. Last is Quaquaval, who terrestrializes and gets off a strong Aqua Step that increases his speed. I continue keeping Kid in, which ends up not working out as he finally ends up getting fully paralyzed. So I switch to Tom, who can negate the next Aqua Step with his Water Absorb ability. Quaquaval ends up missing an Air Slash the next turn, letting Tom use Chilling Water a few times to lower its attack, which is enough for Raymond to come in safely and let off a critical hit Terra Electric Spark to get us the win. Before the next gym battle, I can finally get my last evolution for the run, Rover the Glaceon. Its fur coloring kind of reminds me of cats that have point coloration, such as Siamese cats, hence why I consider Glaceon a cat. My logic is 100% sound. Either way, I can't really say Glaceon would be my first choice of an evolution, but Rover does end up providing some good support for the double battle against Rhine. I lead with him alongside Raymond, who provides the ever so useful Intimidate to start us off. I immediately switch Raymond out for Tangy, while Rover dodges a slash thanks to his Snow Cloak ability, as it just so happens to be snowing at the time. Lucky me! An Icy Wind lowers Banette's speed, while knocking down her Mimikyu's Disguise, and a Snarl from Tangy and another Icy Wind take down Banette, while a critical hit slash surprisingly barely does anything to Rover. My team gets the attack boost from the crowd as Houndstone comes out, and we just continue the Snarl / Icy Wind onslaught to take down Mimikyu and get another offensive boost. Rhyme's Ace Toxtricity comes out and terrestrializes, and it manages to dodge Tangy's next Snarl while Houndstone goes down. Its Discharge nearly takes out Tangy, but while it does get an Omni boost from the crowd for terrestrializing, a final Flamethrower from Tangy is more than enough to finish it off and get us the win. After Tom single-handedly takes down Iron Treads without a sweat, with very little help from Arven, we move on to Alfrenata for the next fight against Nemona. Tom surfs away her Lycanroc after tanking a Rock Slide, then Raymond comes in to shut down Palmot. He does take a couple weak sparks, but I end up forgetting that it has Volt Absorb as its ability, so instead of Volt Switch, we're going to have to manually switch over to Kid, who ends up getting paralyzed coming in on another spark. I risk the crit by keeping him in, but thankfully he fights through paralysis twice to get off a couple Draining Kisses that takes Palmot out and brings him back to nearly full health. Sliggoo is next, and I decide to continue keeping Kid in, as he beats paralysis again to set up a Reflect while shaking off a Dragon Pulse. I then switch over to Rover, who tanks another Dragon Pulse and lets off a couple Freeze Dries to bring Sliggoo down. I then switch to Punchy to take on Quaquaval, who boosts its speed with an Aqua Step on the last turn of our Reflect. I Terrestrialize Punchy to pure Grass type, but an Air Slash ends up flinching while bringing him below half. Great. It's a good thing we have Raymond to intimidate and lower its attack, but a single Spark isn't enough to take it down, so Bob comes in to finish the fight with a couple Snarls. Things started to get a little hairy towards the end there, but the next fight against Tulip goes a bit more smoothly. Raymond starts off against Farigiraf with a crunch that brings it down to a 4th, so we can get an easy pivot on the next turn with Volt Switch and bring in Kid as Farigiraf goes down. Kid sets up a light screen after his Pathra comes in, then we exchange a few Shadow Balls before finishing off with a Draining Kiss. Next is Gardevoir, and we mirror match a couple more Shadow Balls before I decide to bring in Punchy. He does take a chunk of damage from a Dazzling Gleam, but after Terrestrializing, he can easily let loose a few Flower Tricks to take down Gardevoir and Tulip's Terrestrialized Forges for another easy win. And I guess now is a good time to get our final eligible encounter. Which one is it? Well, after going back to school and sitting through several of Mr. Salvatore's lessons and completing multiple tests, we can get a free Galarian Meowth who gets the honor of being named Mo. He quickly evolves into Berserker, and even though he has a not-so-useful Quiet nature, his Tough Claws ability will make him a deceptively powerful team member. Which is great, as his Steel typing will be handy for our final gym battle against Grusha and his Ice types. Tangy starts the fight by roasting Grusha's Frostmoth with a Flamethrower, but the next one isn't enough to take down his Beartic, which responds with a powerful Earthquake that brings her down to a 4th. So I switch over to Tom, who absorbs an Aqua Jet with Water Absorb, and then we start setting up with a Calm Mind. After eating an Earthquake, a Surf brings it down, and Cetitan comes in next. It manages to bring Tom below half with an Ice Spinner, and it ends up being beefy enough to survive a boosted Surf. So I bring in Mo for his official debut, who easily tanks another Ice Spinner in Liquidation, while getting the KO with a Trailblaze which boosts his speed. The speed boost then allows him to outspeed Grusha's Terrestrialize Altaria to get a clean and easy one-hit KO with a Terra-boosted Iron Head. Not a bad debut. Next we head further north to take on Team Star's Ortega and his Fairy types. Raymond starts with taking out his Azumarill with Spark, then I have him Volt Switch over to Kid, who sets up a Reflect the next turn. This allows me to bring in Mo safely, who can use Fake Out to flinch, but on the next turn, a Mud Slap from Darkspun makes his Iron Head miss. So I decide to switch gears by swapping over to Tom, who takes Darkspun and Wigglytuff down with some Surfs, just in time for the Reflect to wear off as Ortega's Starmobile comes in. I have Tom lower its attack with Chilling Water, then bring in Raymond to lower it further with Intimidate. Raymond takes next to nothing from a Steel Roller, which inadvertently gets rid of Ortega's own Misty Terrain. That's a smart move. Before Raymond can Volt Switch out, he does end up getting confused by Confuse Ray, but a held Person Berry clears that right up, allowing it to get off unimpeded. Mo comes in, just for it to use Confuse Ray again, but he manages to fight through it to get off a couple Iron Heads, which is enough to take Ortega's Starmobile down and get us our next Team Star victory. The Titan Pokemon this playthrough have been pretty easy to deal with, and the Titan Dondozo and Tatsugiri are no different. They're no match for Raymond and Punchy, and Arven helped too, I guess. So we quickly move on to the last Team Star boss, Aerie and her fighting types. It's Kid's time to shine, first by setting up a Reflect, then getting a one-hit KO on Aerie's Toxicroak with a Psychic. He then whittles away at Lucario with Draining Kisses, but against Annihilate, Aerie's scariest Pokemon, we have to switch to Raymond for the usual intimidation strategy. Thanks to that, he can survive both a Rage Fist when switching in, and a strong close combat the next turn, and then get a clean KO with a Play Rough. Next is Passimian, who gets off a strong close combat as Tom comes in, which is fine, as Tom uses Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack, which is just barely enough to survive another close combat with just 4 HP. But the risk of staying in pays off, as I bring in Kid to take another weakened close combat, and use Draining Kiss to completely recover his health and take Passimian down. We're finally down to Aerie's Starmobile, and after setting up another Reflect, Kid can unleash a powerful Psychic that brings it down to about a 1/4 of its HP in just one hit. Its Gear Shift is too little too late, as another Psychic takes it down, winning us our last Team Star fight. And now we get to begin the gauntlet of endgame fights, starting with Director Clavel. Punchy starts us off with a Night Slash that brings his Oranguru to the red, as it just goes for a yawn. Not a big deal, as Punchy can U-turn out while getting the KO, and we bring in Tangy to bait out his Gyarados. So I switch over to Raymond to Intimidate, and even with the attack drop, an Aqua Tail brings him below half health. Either way, a 4 times effective Spark is more than enough to bring it down. Next is Obamasnow, who tries to set up the snow, but fails for some reason. There must be some kind of in-game weather event going on. Either way, I bring Tangy back in, who resists a blizzard coming in, but because of her rivalry ability, a single flamethrower isn't enough to one-shot it, even when hitting for quadruple effective damage. I guess the damage swing of rivalry is just that potent. Nonetheless, Tangy takes it out with a hyper voice, and next up is Poltegeist. A health throat spray gives Tangy a special attack boost, so a Snarl brings it below half, while Poltegeist sets up a Shell Smash. The boost in stats is a bit scary, but since it decides to go for Sucker Punch off its lower attacking stat, Tangy can easily survive and finish it with another Snarl. At this point, it's risky keeping Tangy in against Clavel's Amoonguss, so Kid comes in, sets up a light screen, then gets a clean KO with the Psychic, and now we're down to Clavel's Terastallized Skeledirge. It can get very nasty if it's allowed to set up with Torch Song, but we have Bob as our closer. Though, funnily enough, it just ends up spamming Earth Power instead of going for a Torch Song, so after I get sick of missing half of my Snarls, I decide to swap over to Tom, who surfs our way to victory against our principal. Level cap wise, the Elite Four is next up, starting with Rika and her ground types. Whiskash goes down easy to a Flower Trick, then Punchy U-turns over to Tom against her Camerupt, who just misses a Fire Blast and goes down with a quad effective Surf. Her Donphan can survive one hit thanks to his Sturdy ability, but it can't do much else besides a decently strong Earthquake. Another Surf takes down Dugtrio, but before it falls it outspeeds and sets up a Sandstorm just in time for her Clodsire to come in and Terastallize. So I go for Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack, allowing Punchy to come in safely, then let loose a super effective Flower Trick to get our first Elite Four win. Next up is Poppy and her Steel types, and this time Tangy can finally make good use of a rivalry boost to roast Poppy's Copperaja, Bronzong, Corviknight, and Magnezone, though her Magnezone does need 2 hits to go down thanks to Sturdy, and it allows it to set up a light screen for her Terastallized Tinkaton. So instead, it's Raymond who comes in, takes almost nothing from a Stone Edge and the following Gigaton Hammer, and a couple Fire Fangs is all it takes to get an easy second Elite Four win. Third is Larry and his flying types, so I bring in Rover intending to just have him start us off. But he just ends up taking out Larry's entire team all on his own by one-shotting with Ice Beams. Fourth is Hassel, and once again Rover manages to plow through his first 4 dragons with ease up until Baxcalibur. I switch to Raymond, but the most his Intimidate can do is prevent a possible one-hit KO from Glaive Rush, so he can't stay in. We have to switch over to Bob, as another Glaive Rush manages not to bring him below half. So after a series of using Protect to get Leftovers recovery, and a Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack, we can safely bring Tom in to take it down with a few Ice Beams, and get us our final Elite Four victory. But of course, there's still Champion Geeta to deal with. Bob methodically takes care of her Espathra between snarls and keeping his health up with Moonlight. Then Tangy comes in to take care of Go-Goat, who tries to set up with a Bulk Up, but a couple Flamethrowers easily takes it down. Avalugg also goes down easy with another Flamethrower, no surprise there, so I'm confident that another Flamethrower will be enough to take down her King Gambit. And with no thanks to her rivalry ability, King Gambit survives, and a Stone Edge powered up by its Supreme Overlord ability is more than enough to take Tangy out a few times over, giving us our first death of the run. I probably should have expected this to happen, knowing there have been enough times where Tangy has missed out on potential KOs. Rivalry giveth, and rivalry taketh away. We end up getting our revenge by having Punchy immediately Terastallize and let loose multiple boosted Flower Tricks to wipe out her King Gambit, Veluza, and her ace Glamora, earning us the win and title of champion. But I'm not gonna lie, going this long without losing a Pokemon had me excited that I could complete this run deathless, but to reach this point without a death is still an impressive feat. We're finally down to the 3 storyline final bosses, starting with Arven. I lead with Bob against his Greedent, using Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack, as a Body Slam thankfully doesn't paralyze. I switch over to Mo, who does end up getting paralyzed, but he manages to break through and take it out with a single close combat. Next is Scovillain, and I decide to bring back Bob, who manages to dodge a Fire Blast, and after a few snarls, it could basically do nothing damage-wise before going down. Garganacl comes in and sets up Stealth Rocks, while Bob gets off another Baby Doll Eyes before I switch over to Tom. He takes a bit of damage from the Stealth Rocks and a Body Press coming in, and a single Surf isn't quite enough to take it out. So another Body Press brings him below half before he takes it down with a second Surf. I once again bring out Reliable Bob against Arven's Toadscruel, who ends up getting put to sleep with a Spore. I decide to keep him in, and he ends up waking up on the 3rd turn, using Moonlight to heal up the damage from a couple Power Whips. We can now use Baby Doll Eyes to lower its attack before being put to sleep again with another Spore. I keep Bob in again, as Toadscruel switches to using Earth Power, and after waking up on the 2nd turn, we can use Snarl to lower its special attack as well. I now feel confident switching in Punchy, who surprisingly doesn't get put to sleep by Spore, only getting tickled with a limp Power Whip. A U-turn brings it into the red, as Kid comes in and tanks a Sludge Bomb, then finally takes it down with Psychic. Cloyster is next, so I set up a Reflect, which helps blunt the damage of a Liquidation, and a couple Draining Kisses is enough to keep him healthy and bring Cloyster down. We're finally down to Arven's Bobostiff, and I decide to keep Kid in to Terrestrialize into the normal type. With our Reflect up, we can easily survive a non-super effective Crunch while healing back the damage with more Draining Kisses. It does use Psychic Fangs to destroy the Reflect, but it's too little too late, as it's eventually taken down with the final Draining Kiss. 1 story arc complete, 2 to go. Next up is Penny and her team of Eeveelutions. Her team can be somewhat annoying due to every one of her Pokemon knowing Baby Doll Eyes, which can neuter any of my physically inclined team members. But I suppose I don't have the right to complain about that. I start off with Mo against her Umbreon, and predictably she goes for Baby Doll Eyes, which lowers the damage of a close combat, although from a glance it probably wouldn't have knocked it out in one hit anyway. She goes for another Baby Doll Eyes, but a second close combat is enough to take it out. Next is Flareon, so we have to switch over to Tom, who tanks a Flare Blitz, which ends up dealing just over a fourth. Flareon actually outspeeds the next turn to get off another Flare Blitz, bringing Tom below half before a Surf takes it down. Jolteon is next, so I switch over to Raymond, who manages to dodge an incoming Thunder. A second Thunder connects to deal about a fourth, and a Crunch just barely doesn't bring it to half health. A Baby Doll Eyes ensures our next Crunch won't kill, but it does get the defense drop. So after another Thunder brings Raymond below half, his Citrus Berry heals him back up, and another Crunch knocks it out. We're in a good spot as Vaporeon comes out next, as I go for a Volt Switch to deal a decent chunk of damage, and bring in Tom to absorb an incoming Hydro Pump, bringing him back to nearly full health. I then bring back Bob, who takes 2 irrelevant Baby Doll Eyes, before we start spamming Snarls to whittle away at its HP, while Vaporeon could basically do nothing to him before going down. Next up is Leafeon, and it's at this point that I choose to have Bob Terrestrialize into the normal type, so that Leafeon's X-Scissor will no longer be super effective. Between more Baby Doll Eyes and Snarls, surviving a critical Leaf Blade, and using Moonlight to heal up, we can slowly chip away at Leafeon until we're just left with Penny's ace, Sylveon. A few more Snarls ensure that Sylveon won't be able to do much, even with Fairy, Terrestrialize boosted Moonblast, so after healing back all the damage with Moonlight, I bring Mo in to finish the fight with a couple Iron Heads, as we complete our second story arc. Next up is the penultimate fight of the run against Nemona. We start the fight with Punchy instantly taking out her Lycanroc with a Flower Trick, then U-turning out against Palmont. Raymond comes in to intimidate and tank a close combat fairly well. I risk a crit by keeping him in, as a second close combat brings him into the red, but after healing with a Citrus Berry, Raymond ends up missing a Play Rough. It's obviously no longer safe to stay in, so I switch over to Kid, who takes a large chunk of damage from a critical hit close combat. But thanks to the defense drops, Kid just needs a single Draining Kiss to take it out and completely heal back up. Next up is the Dunsparce, whose Hyper Drill deals some decent damage even after Kid sets up a Reflect. I keep Kid in to get off a Draining Kiss, which doesn't do much as it goes for a Coil. So the next turn I go for Psychic, which brings it down to about a fourth of its HP, as a more powerful Hyper Drill brings Kid down to a fourth as well. Another Psychic takes it out, and Earthworm comes out next. I switch to Tom, who barely takes anything from an Iron Tail, although it does get the defense drop. I go for Baby Doll Eyes to offset it, but I completely forgot that it knows Body Press, and that it uses its defense stat to calculate its damage instead of attack. I only figure that out after a couple more Baby Doll Eyes, and once our Reflect runs out. An unimpeded Body Press brings Tom down to a fourth, and a Surf does the same to Earthworm, so after protecting one more time for some recovery, we need to switch Tom out. I bring in Mo, who can survive a single Body Press, and with a Held Choice Scarf, he can outspeed and finally take it out with a close combat. Goodra next, and the team is starting to look a little banged up, but I still have Bob and all of his defensive might to keep us going. A Muddy Water on the switch barely does anything, and as usual, a few Snarls completely shut down anything Goodra can do. After healing with Moonlight and a few more Snarls, it is now completely safe to bring in Punchy, who takes virtually nothing from a Dragon Pulse, and thankfully connects with a Play Rough to take out Goodra. This sets us up perfectly as Quaquaval comes in last, because with just one final Terra Grass-powered Flower Trick, Punchy gets a one-hit KO, and me and my team of felines can consider ourselves the champion of champions of Paldea. Now that all 3 story arcs are complete, we have to delve into the depths of Area Zero for the true final fight of the game against AI Turo and his team of future Paradox Pokémon. Let's see if my team has what it takes to end the run on a strong note, or if everything before was just a fluke. We start our final battle with Kid against Iron Moth, who goes down easy with a single Psychic. Iron Jugulis is next, so I switch to Punchy, who tanks a Dark Pulse, then retaliates with a strong Play Rough, but not enough for a one-hit KO. He then survives an Air Slash with just 4 HP, which was definitely exactly as planned. So we U-turn to Bob in order to bait out Turo's Iron Hands, and it comes out as planned, so I switch back to Kid, expecting a fighting type move, but it just goes for a pointless fake out. I set up Reflect the next turn as it goes for a moderately strong Thunder Punch, and then we go for a Draining Kiss, bringing Kid back to almost full HP. The Psychic next turn takes it down, and Iron Thorns comes out next. I switch back over to Bob, but it probably wasn't the best move, as it goes for a Brick Break to take out our Reflect and hit Bob super effectively. But Bob being Bob can start his usual cycle of Baby Doll Eyes, Protect for Leftovers recovery, and Moonlight to stall out and lower its attack to manageable levels. So once I'm satisfied, it's Tom's turn to safely come in, tank a Thunder Punch, then use Surf, but it survives on just a sliver. Keeping Tom in risks a critical hit or paralysis from another Thunder Punch, so I switch to Raymond, who can easily tank a hit, then take out Iron Thorns with a Wild Charge. Iron Bundle is next, but a Freeze Dry doesn't even bring Raymond below half, and a Wild Charge gets a one-hit KO. And just like that, we're down to AI Turo's last Pokemon, Iron Valiant. This thing is fast and powerful, and even more so when it uses its booster energy to up its attack. None of my Pokemon can switch in safely, so I have to keep Raymond in knowing he may end up a sacrifice. But he survives a Spirit Break on just 7 HP. With that lucky break, he can Volt Switch out, and Tom can come in safely to negate Iron Valiant's attack boost with a Baby Doll Eyes. Tom goes for Protect the next turn for Leftovers recovery, uses 2 more Baby Doll Eyes, and manages to stay alive on 43 HP. I switch over to Mo the Berserker, who survives 2 super effective Brick Breaks, and gets the kill with a single Iron Head, granting us our final victory and completing the run. This run was a blast, and I'm more than satisfied with how everything went. This was the closest I've ever been to a deathless run, something many Nuzlockers strive for. And if I was to crown an MVP for the run, Bob the Umbreon would take it uncontested. There are many battles that would not have gone my way without his defensive utility, and those sweet lovable Baby Doll Eyes. All in all, I'm happy we're at a point in the franchise where we can build teams of Pokemon beyond just typing or roles. So please let me know in the comments if you want to see more specialized runs like this one, and please like, comment, and subscribe for more Nuzlocke content. As always, thank you for watching.